Hello and welcome to TidyX episode 113. TidyX is a screencast where we go through and explain how our code works. My name is Ellis Hughes.
And my name is Patrick Ward, and today we are extending our talk on objects to
Yes.
S4 objects. And this is a super cool and interesting episode. It is, I'll be upfront, way outside of things that I do on my day to day as a lowly analyst. um, this is definitely getting more into software design and development, rather, in Ellis's world. But it is super cool, and as an analyst, you'll see why this is important when people are developing packages and things like that. So I'm going to play the role of village idiot here today, and Ellis is going to take the reins and talk. And I'm going to ask all the stupid questions for you guys. I'll be the village idiot. So here we go.
If you have any questions, leave them down below. Happy to discuss them. Yeah, these are getting into concepts that are more important when you're doing package design and software development for packages. But I think as an analyst and a person writing R scripts, understanding how all these works really helps advance your scripting abilities and it helps
Mm.
you move things forward. And this isn't only applicable to people that are developing packages. So keep that in mind as you go forward. So I'm going to make our videos a little bit smaller here and we'll get going on this. So yeah, episode 113, making an S4 object. So as we've talked at length, and in fact we just finished up several episodes on S3 objects, R has a really rich object system that exists. There's the base objects, S3, which is super loosey-goosey and super flexible. That's what I use a lot of the time. But of course, there's even more object types that exist. There's the S4, which we're about to get into, R6, RC. There's even, apparently I heard on this podcast earlier today about like there's an R5 object apparently at some point. And then at our studio conf several weeks ago, Hadley gave a little bit of a talk around the R7 object class, which is our consortium project that people have been working on to develop yet another object class, but trying to take the strengths from various other systems that exist and try to put them together just to make everyone's lives easier. Yeah, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
in the past, a lot of our packages on CRAN use the S3 object system. You've probably used R6 and not realized it. It's in a lot of our studio packages, but under the hood, you don't actually use them. The place that I have come across S4 objects the most often is if I'm using a package from Bioconductor. And Bioconductor is kind of like CRAN in that it serves as a repository for packages, but Bioconductor is a repository of packages specifically built for folks that are doing bioinformatics or biotype work, and they have an object S4 object class called an expression set. So they do a lot of really great work. Really want to call them out for doing a really great job there. But one unique thing about them is they really have embraced this S4 object system. So if you ever intend to work with or submit a package to Bioconductor or are working with packages from Bioconductor, you will have or will be using an S4 object. Or object system. To be clear, these are object systems. These are not like names. They're not like a numeric. It is a type of object system. Of course, Hadley has some information on S4 objects in his advanced R book. So if you want to read a little bit about that. But why would we use an S4 object? What's the benefit of using that? So it's a more strictly defined system. So when you create it, you don't get to just make an object and say, hey, this is this type class, and then go on and kind of go on your way. You need to, ahead of time, define what is the name of this object and what are the contents, what are the types of those contents. And those contents are called slots. And so in this slot, you define, like, slot in this object will be X, and X will be a numeric. And the benefit of that is it does the type checking for you. So like with S3, you have to do the type checking yourself. S4, if you say this type should be a numeric, it will always be a numeric. If you enter something that's not a numeric and you try to put it into that X slot, it'll say, nah dog, not up in here, has to be a numeric. Can't be a character, can't be an integer, can't be anything else. So that's like a really cool and nice feature. So it kind of removes some of the difficulties for you, and then it still uses methods. The way you create and define these are different. So once again, it's more like programmer heavy type work, but it's like the goal is to try to make it so you very clearly define what your expectations are. And there's a little bit of a dated but really good read from Christoph Gentilini on Cran's contributed pages called his words, not so short, to S4. And so it's like 68 pages, so it's really in depth. It's a little bit outdated, like I said, it's from 2008, but it does have a really good set of information for you to like get the gist of how things work, even though the system has moved a little bit forward. So does that make sense? Patrick, do you have any questions around what we've talked about
I
right
think,
now?
One of the things to me with this, and you've lectured on this before, given your type of work in package validation. Really, the benefits that you just laid out, aside from being very strict in how you define things and formalizing these things, is for the end user, someone like myself. These are really there to protect me from from doing anything ridiculous. So they're just going to bark out errors and not allow me to do silly things. So it protects me from myself. But the other thing is, if you're doing, if you're in a line of work like you are, where you need to validate everything for medical purposes or something like that, this type of stuff is really important because it clearly defines what the end user can and cannot do. So it ensures that there's some really tight guardrails around any errors that can come up, and it allows you to ensure that the results are in some way replicable and valid and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the goal is to try to, and this is just like in general packages, even though my line of work, we do care about that. Just in general, like if you're developing a package, you're going to make assumptions as you go, as you develop your code. You just kind of have to in order to be able to move forward. If you can do paralysis by analysis and go, what if they do it this way? What if they do it that way? By putting guardrails and creating your objects, you can say, this is what this needs to be, and prevent people from doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And so that your code can not be so insane and have to deal with, what if they do this, what if they do that, what if they actually enter a number but it's a character value, and try to handle all those things. You go, no, this is what it needs to be in order for me to move forward. And so it just it brings down the space of code that you have to write down to a much more reasonable level. And then you like you can have your code, how it should behave given various inputs, either give an error or a warning or whatever, based on the inputs.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's step forward here and actually create this S4 object we keep on talking about. And so with S3, you may remember that we would initialize a new S3 object using the structure function. Well, S4 requires two different steps here. So first we have to define this object with setClass. So setClass is where I say, hey, this is the content that will be going into my object. This is what I expect for there to be. And so this is what I mean by you need to think more ahead of time about what will be going into your object and the name of it too. Here you say the class of my object. So this new class that I'm going to be creating, I'm going to call it my S4 because I'm very unimaginative. The slots, so the different types of data that I can enter into this and where it will be stored in my object, is entered in this slots argument here. And so it takes a named vector, the first argument being the name of the argument that it's going to be. And so in this case, I'm going to have a slot in my S4 object that'll be numeric. And this is a character, so this is kind of like going back. This is a scalar character vector, so a length 1 character vector describing the class that'll be there. So it's like a little bit circular, but so I'm saying that X will be a numeric.
Yeah. And if you had multiple slots, you would just put a comma and do X2 or Y equals numeric as well, right? Yeah.
Or Z is character.
Yeah.
So you can the types of objects that exist, you enter it in here.
Yep.
And it's the like the base class It's
Yep.
complicated with that. So let's delete that. And then you can define, and this is optional, the prototype. So the prototype is, hey, if you don't enter information into this slot, what should be the value that goes into this? And so in this case, I wanted there, like, you don't need to define this, but I said when I create a S4 object, if I don't define X, just put an empty numeric vector in
Yeah.
and drop that in. You don't have to do that. And I think that'll force whoever's creating the new S4 object to put in a value, but that is my assumption right now. I don't remember off the top of my head. So we run that, and so, but it didn't really do anything. All this has done is said in my R environment, when I call new, which is the function that actually creates my new S4 object, this is the information that I will be needing to construct my new S4 object. And so now to create it, we call this new function here, the class that we're going to be creating. So this is my S4, and this has to be, this object class has to exist in the environment in order to move forward. And then the argument and the value entered into this. And so we can now run this, now that we've defined this in our environment, run this. We now have our my S4 object. Boom, there you go. Bob's your uncle. We have a new S4 object with a value of 24. Hey!
And what if, because the slot X has to be numeric, what happens if you were to put something silly in there?
Yeah, well, here we're going to try to do that.
Oh,
here
there we go.
And we'll see what runs there, and it does not let me do that. It does not let me move forward. You do not pass go. You do not collect $100. You are not able to enter that in. And so that's like a protection that S3, so like this is like why some people like S4 over S3 is I was able to say, nah dog, you can only enter in a numeric.
Right.
And this prevented me from doing that. With an S3 object, just in the constructor, we can't define the types that it is. We have to write a wrapper function around it to tell and then perform the checks for us to prevent us from accidentally doing this.
Same as if it were a list. If we decided we don't want to use any of these methods, we just want to make a list, it would just drop that value right into the string of numbers, and then later on downstream you try and do an analysis and you figure out why
like why isn't this working, and then
something's not working.
See up there while you were testing your code, you accidentally were dropping in a character vector.
So we got a little bit of a safeguard there. All right.
Yep,
cool.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. So let's create a little bit more of a complicated one, an object class here. So some of you may have noticed we're trying to follow what we did for S3 a few episodes back. So if you want to see how to do this with an S3 object, go back to that episode. I think it was 109.
Yeah.
So here we're going to create our custom message class, and we have to do the same process that we followed before. So we use the set class function here. We define our class. So our class is custom message. We have 3 slots here. So one difference too between an S3 or not one, there's many differences between them. But another difference is that as far as I'm aware, there's not attributes. So with the S3 object, you may have remembered that we had attribute and attributes that we could add to it with that. So it's like information that's not data that's included in it. Here, we're just going to be using these slots to contain the information here. So we're going to have 3 different slots here. We're going to have message, authors, and creation time. So message is a character, so this is the message that we're sending. Authors, so this is a character as well, so these are the names of the people that wrote the message. And then creation time, and this is a POSIX CT, so that is a date object. So we talked a little bit about these in episode 108, so it's all full circle. 108? I think it was 108.
Yeah.
And so then we create our prototype, so this is defining what are the values that should be going into this. On initialization, if we don't define anything ahead of time. And so this is saying the message will be a character, authors will be a character, and creation time is going to call systime and get the value of my computer when we run this. Cool, so now we've done that, and so now we simply, to create a new object, we call new, the object class that we're creating, and the arguments that are going into this. You may notice that we're not going to define creation time. That because it's a prototype, it'll automatically create it for us because we want it to be accurate for what the current time is. So there we go. So now we've run it, and as you can see, we have our 3 slots here: message, authors, and creation time. TidyX is awesome. Yeah, it is. By you and me. And it is August 13th, which is
Cool.
The Saturday before this goes live.
Nice. So what okay. So what will we do with this going forward? We've got
so what we can do is, as you can see here, the printing of this is not very nice. This is like, yeah, we're able to read it, but it's not, I guess, not how I would want to have it be presented.
Okay.
To me. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go through and show how we can develop a method for this, which is similar to the idea that we did in S3, where there's methods for printing and whatnot. S4 also has that same sort of idea. But as is theme with S4, there's a little bit more infrastructure around it for it to be able to work. So it doesn't like go all willy-nilly.
Yep.
So with S3 objects, you may remember that they use a dot notation to create new methods, which is why when you create new objects, do not use dots in your objects. That is, can create weird things that exist in your environments. So with S3, if we wanted to create a new print function, we do print dot the class we were building this for.
Yep.
And with S4, once again, it's not loosey-goosey. You don't do that sort of thing. You use the set method function. And for S4 objects, I believe there might be a print method, but you actually use the show method to change how it prints out, which like took me for a loop when I was writing this. S4 is not something I've done a ton of in a long time, so it took me a little bit to remember all these things. So we use this set method function. Once again, the method that we're trying to create the method for our class for, circular there is best. Then the signature. So this is what is the class that we're trying to do this for. And so we have to set this up in a kind of a strange way, where you say the signature is a result of the signature function, where the object is a custom message. And this is important because this named argument has to match both the generic show. So you can, if you look at the show function that exists in R, this is a generic. It's a standard generic for show, defined in the methods package. So methods comes in base R. So all this is in base R. We're not doing anything super fancy. But the argument for this function is object. So that's why we knew object needed to go here and object needed to go here. So that's why it's weird. It's not like print where it's just function X and blah, 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 and like the arguments don't matter and the rules are made up. This is like very defined. Then we go through and we go and write our print method. This is the same code, more or less, to do the S3 object. The difference in this case is you may, in S4 objects, you do not access anything with a $sign. You can see here in the code, I guess it's kind of small. Sorry, the code has been small this episode. $sign, you can't access anything. The way you access S4 slots is with the @ symbol. And this is how you get access to things. One thing to note as well is that's not how you should be accessing things in your S4 objects normally. There's usually a get method that already exists because these slots are supposed to be private. That's why they're not accessible using $signs. The @ symbol exists for the developers of that object to pull the contents out for you. So if you're trying to get at contents of your S4 object, there's probably a function that exists in the package to get that for you, or the package author did not want you to pull the information out. So,
right.
Caution, warning. Do not just go in and start using the @ symbol to pull stuff out of your out of the S4 objects that you're working with. That is not the purpose of that. You can do that, just as you can do a lot of things.
Doesn't make it right.
Doesn't mean you should.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
So then we're just going to pull out the message slot here, the author slot, and paste it together to make a nice vector, and then pull out the creation time as well, and then concatenate all this together and print this out, or using the cat method. So we now can run this. It's happy dappy. Don't know where that came from. And we can now run this, and now my message shows exactly like it did for our S3 object.
Yeah, that's
So
nice.
that's kind of nice. That creates a new thing.
Yeah.
We're now gonna prevent us from actually having to call new directly. Not that it's difficult, but like sometimes we might want constructors. Sometimes we might want to get at some derived values to enter into our S4 object from the user. So we can use this constructor, class constructor. So it's basically the same as what we did for our S3 object, where it's we're going to write a new function. So new message, it's a function with takes the arguments message and by. We don't want the people entering in the creation time because we want it to be representative of when the object got created. And this is just wrapping around the new function and slotting in message and by into our S4 object. And so this just makes it a little bit more friendly for people to construct their objects. And now we can do like, hey, you should like and subscribe to TidyX. I'm saying this, and we can print that out, and it uses that same show method as we had here. I said that, and I said this towards the end of our episode. Then Patrick and I both said you should consider becoming a patron at Patreon, patreon.com/tidy_explained, because if the work that we're doing has helped you in any way and you'd like to contribute to us continuing to do this work, we would really appreciate it.
There you go.
But yeah, that is how you can interact with S4 objects, create a new one. Like I said, we're not doing this in a package, so you're not limited to having to work in a package in order to work with these object systems and develop them. You can have them in your R scripts. If you want to kind of abstract away some of the logic so earlier on so you don't have to think about it as closely, this is the way that you could go about doing it with S4 objects. Patrick, do you have anything you'd like to share before we end the episode here?
No, that's super interesting stuff. Like I said, it's kind of outside of what my daily wheelhouse looks like, but it is really important stuff for those of us that are using these packages to know a little bit about what's going on under the hood, and of course know a little bit about if we want to then develop our own packages. And that was super cool intro, and next week we'll turn this into something a little more applied and actually show how we can use it with probably the same example that we use the S3 bucket, the S3 not S3 bucket, the S3 object. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So with that, as always, my name is Ellis Hughes, and you can find me on Twitter at Ellis_Hughes.
And my name is Patrick Ward. You can find me on Twitter at OSPPatrick. And the both of us are on Twitter at tidy_explained, tidy.explained. Tidy.explained at gmail.com is where you can email us. But most people will go to the YouTube channel, like and subscribe, drop a comment below. As the message says at the bottom there, if our work has been beneficial to you, we do have a Patreon page, and we appreciate any contributions to support our coffee habits. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you all so much, and keep on exploring your world.